Fantasy Source Baseball Podcast. My name is David A. Arnott, sitting here with Matt Lutovsky, and today we're going to be talking about something that is very important to us as Fantasy Source Baseball contributors, and that is we have our Roto Rater stats.
Yes.
The Roto Rater being just a metric, a rating, as it were, as the name might imply,
Right.
of who is valuable in fantasy baseball, specifically 5x5 leads, traditional stats, batting average, ERA, so on and so forth. So it brings it all down to one number, and in front of us we have the lists of the top 20 Roto Rater guys, hitters, and pitchers. And today we're going to be talking about the guys that we think, yeah, they're going to be there at the end of the year. And you know what? That guy, he's way outperforming what his Roto Rater might indicate so far.
Yeah, we're a month in, so now's a good time to kind of stop, assess the players, assess your team, the individual players on your team, and figure out who's for real and who's not.
Now, I'm going to suspect from looking at this list that you think Lance Berkman is not going to be at the top of this list by the time the season ends, but he could very well be in that list. So you're not going to talk about him as your guy that's going to be, is no way he's going to be in that top 20.
No, Berkman won't be number one. But he could. Hey, he could. He's playing really well. We've seen him play well before. The guy that I kind of highlighted, and there are guys like Francoeur, Alex Gordon, who you say, well, he won't be in. But a guy that I highlighted who's right around the number 10 spot is Brandon Phillips. And the reason why I don't think he's going to be there at the end of the year is because right now a lot of his ranking comes from the fact he's hitting 366. Mm-hmm. And he's not going to hit 366. He's not going to hit close to 366. He's not hitting 366, but his batting average on balls in play is 366, which has his batting average up in like the 340s or wherever it is. And his career batting average on balls in play, 289. Like, that is going to come down significantly. And when that comes down, his batting average is going to come down. He's going to score less runs, which is his second best category right now. And what you're left with is a guy who right now has 4 home runs, 2 stolen bases. I know he was hurt, but those numbers aren't very good. And you're going to be left with a solid second baseman, but not a top 20 fantasy player.
Now, there's another guy on that list that seems very similar to him, although not getting nearly as many steals historically, and that's Placido Polanco. He's the guy that I highlighted. Talk a little bit about him and what you see from him moving forward. Main thing that I'm seeing is that the Phillies' offense, which might have given him a lot of his value in years past, they're not nearly as good as they were in previous years, especially with Chase Utley being out.
Right, and I think Polanco's another guy, very high batting average on balls in play right now, which he typically is fairly high, but not. Yes. I think he's like in the 380 range. It's something crazy.
Right.
And again, another guy who derives his value, or right now his value is derived from this really high batting average, and you can't count on that to hang around, and that can fluctuate very wildly. And he's going to be a guy then who's going to fall as a result.
Well, what about a guy that you think other managers will see that list? And by the way, you can find these lists on Fantasy Source Baseball.
In the stat tables.
But somebody else might look at this list and think to themselves, you know what? That guy, I think it's just more fluky than real. And you would say, no. I understand where you're coming from, but this guy's going to be staying on the list.
Right, and that's one of my favorites, Jose Bautista. I love this guy, and I think people will always doubt him. Just because he's Jose Bautista.
Because he was 30 before he hit more than 18 home runs in a year.
And here's the reason I love him. We were talking about high batting average on balls in play. He fits that bill. Right now, 356. Last year, 233. So you can expect a regression there in average, but he's still going to have the power. And the Blue Jays steal bases this year. Last year they didn't. Cito Gaston didn't run. Now they got John Farrell in there. They're running. I think he's going to steal 15 bases, give or take. And the other big thing, he has 16 RBI this year, 9 homers. That's going to go up. He's going to start getting a lot more RBIs. And so even though that batting average comes down, I think all the other numbers are going to be fantastic, and he's going to be a top 10 guy.
This is a classic example of modern baseball analysis, melding the stats, melding the data that is out there and pitch at-bats, hit at-bats, and all that stuff, and just common sense scouting acumen to point out that Bautista's process, his entire process of hitting has changed.
Right.
Nobody in the major leagues takes angrier swings than he does.
Yeah, he just sprays line drives all over the field, and you can say he's not going to hit 54 home runs, but he could lead the league with 45, and he's going to be a top 10 fantasy producer.
I mean, that's just fantastic right there. And you know what? Let the others doubt. Let everyone doubt. You'll take him in the 5th round or whatever it is every year, and he's better than Adam Dunn because he's not going to hit 220.
And he's going to steal 15. People, probably a lot of managers, fantasy owners, don't realize that the Blue Jays are a running team now. I think he's got 4 stolen bases already. and he finished last year with like 7 or 8, something like that. I think he's going to get 15 steals to go along with all those homers.
Let's move on to the pitchers.
Right.
There's not really. There's a notion in fantasy baseball that I'm not going to say it's true, not true, that pitching is much more variable. I think on a year-to-year basis, sure, we can go along with that. But I'm not exactly certain that you can say that starting pitching is unpredictable, if that made some sense. That you're going to have the better pitchers are going to be the better pitchers, and then the worst pitchers are going to be the worst pitchers. However, there are some guys on this list that I would just say, what is that guy doing there?
Right.
Who are the guys that you're seeing?
Well, I think, names that jump out. Kyle Loesch's name jumps out. Josh Tomlin, I mean, that really jumps out. Randy Wolf, who was really bad last year and is pitching really well right now. Those guys are probably overachieving. But I'm going to give you a guy who is really good, who everyone thinks, or knows, I should say, is really good, that I think is going to fall out of this top 20. That's John Lester. And the reason for that is because his K per 9 is way down right now. Now, you can look at that two ways. Say, well, then it's going to go up. Or you can say, hey, maybe he's not striking as many guys out.
Maybe there's something wrong.
Right, exactly. But the big thing, again, we're gonna bring it back. Batting average on balls in play. Right now, 257, career mark 300. That suggests that he's overachieving right now, getting a little lucky. And you look, too, at his ERA, 2.52, his FIP, as you don't like it to be called, but his fielding independent pitching, 3.73. He's being a little fortunate right now. And if that K rate stays around 8 instead of 9.5 where it usually is, he's not going to be as valuable. When those advanced stats catch up with his standard numbers, he's not going to be quite as valuable.
Now, it's entirely possible, and keep in mind, possible that Lester has been fortunate up till now, but he'll change something in his process, and his fortune, though it may drop off, his skill will more than catch up.
Because we know he has the track record.
Right. He's a very skilled pitcher.
Right.
But correct me if I'm wrong, what I'm hearing you say is that if his skill doesn't change, fortune will eventually catch up to him and go back down and lower his esteem as a pitcher.
And he's a guy who people love. We had him ranked kind of low in our preseason rankings, and he was going well above where we had him ranked. And I think that's part of the whole Boston. He pitches for Boston, the East Coast, what have you. It's also because his whip's a little higher than a lot of people realize, and a lot of his value last year came from his high win total, and we all know wins can be fluky. So that's why I kind of view him as a good sell-high guy. Maybe I'm crazy, but that's just me.
Now, I also see on your list you have a guy that has been something of a sabermetric whipping boy over the past 2 years now. Trevor Cahill of the Oakland Athletics.
Yeah, big knock on him. He had the high, advanced metrics that were way worse than what his actual numbers were. But the big thing was he didn't have a very good strikeout rate. He was basically the new Tim Hudson.
Right.
Well, this year he's striking guys out. He's up at around 7.75, which is much more consistent with what he did in the minors than what he had done in the majors. So that ability was there always to strike guys out. He's tapping into it now in the major league level, primarily because he's throwing a curveball, which is what Jared Weaver did to become a big strikeout guy too. So I like him. I think he's still undervalued right now, but I think he's going to have his occasional blow up. But he doesn't walk anyone. He doesn't give up homers, and he can strike guys out. He gets a ton of ground balls. I mean, what more do you want?
Hey, that's exactly what everybody wants, isn't it?
Yeah.
Hey, you know what? There's a guy that sounds just like that up ahead in the list, and that's Roy Halladay.
That's right.
I mean, well, look at the list, though, just running down the final little oddities there. Top 2 starting pitchers, according to Roto are both Los Angeles Angels.
Yes.
Am I supposed to say Los Angeles Angels of Anaheim?
I think it's everything. Yeah.
It's something along those lines. Jared Weaver, again, great pitcher. Everyone acknowledges he's a great pitcher, doing way better than anybody expected. Dan Herron notoriously drops off in the second half.
Right.
And then, of course, we've got Josh Johnson, Roy Halladay, and the aforementioned Kyle Loesch.
Kyle Loesch, yes.
The aforementioned Kyle Loesch, who we think is probably going to drop off.
Yes. But no, there's a lot of interesting names here. I think a guy like Tommy Hanson is interesting because he had such a bad, his first 2 starts were poor. He's dealing right now, and he's a guy who we could see continue to rise. And Michael Pineda, smack dab right in the middle, is a guy who, I love, but with him, he's going to get shut down early. Make no mistake. He'll be on an innings limit, so you have to take that into account.
All right. Thanks, Matt.
All right.